Good evening. Hammond Organ Leslie Technician Network. Even though I'm not a bona fide technician, but I am a musician and a keyboard player, a professional one. This is my A100. Here's my Rhodes 54. This is a Leslie 142. It was a 145. It had a 147 amp. I put a 122 amp in it, and I wired it up with the appropriate kit in the A100 so that it has both half moon switches for main, chorale, and echo, and I put my speed switches, to me, for a much more logical place when you play, which is here. Also, by the way, just for interest's sake, this is a 1979 Fender Rhodes. No, it's a Rhodes 1979 that I restored. The top didn't need a lot of work, but the bottom, the Janus amps, had to be rebuilt. The preamp, it's a Janus, not a Peterson. This really is a beautiful sounding Rhodes. I got it running with a Yamaha digital reverb up there on top. But anyway, the purpose of this is to document a little bit of the series of events that happened with weird shit happening with this A100 142 combination over time. Burst of static, microphonic tube symptoms as you kind of tap on the cabinet. The cabinet is live in the bus. Just weird miscellaneous things, and then a hum that eventually rendered the organ unplayable. And so the series of events that unfolded, I wanted to show. I was able to borrow this really cool deal. This is a Heathkit tube checker. So subsequently I've checked all the tubes in the A100 preamp, main amplifier, and in the Leslie 122. And if you're not familiar with this unit, it's a little involved. A friend of mine let me borrow this, but you know, you gotta scroll through here. Multiple tubes listed where on a paper roll, right? And then you have to set the settings. But I tested all the tubes on this machine, and they all tested good, which I was not able to get this until a couple of days ago. But I was impatient and I wanted to get to the bottom of the issue. So what I'm going to do is set the camera down, and I'm going to start this organ up. And from my previous post, you know that I took out the 428 8000 Leslie kit, which was the appropriate kit to interface to the 142. I took that out because it's bad. And in the meantime, as I was troubleshooting the 122 amp, found a couple of other issues. One is that my Amphenol connector on the Leslie 122 chassis had a crack and a loose pin, so I'm addressing that issue. Actually, Spearhead Music is going to go through my 122 and fix these issues. I swapped out the death caps. I got that done, and that was all well and good, but it needed to be gone through. But anyway, with the appropriate 4H kit, you can run the organ. This is the beauty of an A100 as opposed to a B3 or a C3, is it has its own amplification system. And one of my main priorities was to keep the value of this instrument, was to keep that system. And I've done a lot to maintain the internal amp of the A100, and one of the reasons being is because it has a very good reverb system built into it, and you should use it. And so what I've done after a fairly long time of trying to figure out the best way to use the internal amps with the Leslie is this speaker sitting right here on top of the 142 is a 12-inch Jensen mod speaker, and my reverb signal is coming out of it, so that is blended with the sound of the Leslie, which is dry. Anybody that plays the B3 with no reverb, man, that's really tough for me being a professional keyboard player, not having any reverb on the organ sound, especially in a room like this with carpet that's really dry. So I put a female 1/4-inch connector on my speaker inside the organ, and you can plug any 12-inch into the reverb and put it wherever you want, and it goes nicely sitting on top of the Leslie. The reverb is not being spun in the rotor like it would be if you bought the Trek 2 saddle kit. So even though the Leslie is not hooked up at the moment because the kit is off and the amp is being gone over by Spearhead Music, you can still run the organ. So I took all the tubes out of the preamp and the main amp, and I checked them all, and they're all good, and I cleaned the sockets and reseated them, and that seemed to have helped some, so that now the sound of the organ confirmed was not problematic. There was no issue with the tone generator or the internal workings of the organ, except now the elusive hum has come back again, but at a different time in the day there is no hum, which tells me that it's external that's causing some of this to happen. But in the meantime, and the line box has not been rebuilt. So the tremolo and chorus is using the original wax capacitors, but is doing all right and is not giving me any issues. The tone generator on this organ has been recapped by me. As you can hear, there's nothing wrong with the sound, the organ at all. There's a little teeny bit of, and it just dissipated greatly as whatever the interference I've got in the air dissipates. But this organ is in very good shape. So the diagnosing of the 428 8000 box was the correct assessment here, and it wasn't the 122, but it was the box that was making the hum and the distortion and sending it to the 122, and also it was feeding back up into the tone generator and giving me issues in the organ. So once that box is out of here, proves that the organ is in good shape, and it was not off base to begin with the 122, and it was a good idea because it had some issues, mainly being a cracked connector, so that if you jiggle the connector, the Leslie cable plugging into the 122, it would dead short, and it's had that problem ever since I've had that amp. So now is the time to correct that. No more dead short if you move the Leslie and the cable is a little loose. That's not good for anything. So we're going through the Leslie. It has a new can cap, which it didn't need at all, but I put a $55 can capacitor in it. I put the safety caps in it, which is all well and good, but we're replacing the amphenol. We're going to do the coupling caps for the 12AU7 drive tube, which filters out the DC. We're going to recap those. The other caps in it were good, have been replaced. Marcus is going to go through it, and it's going to be cherry pink. So when I put the 122 back in and put the new kit from BB Organ, I'm going to be back to screaming Mimi the way I was before. So you can hear that this organ sounds wonderful. So checking the tubes, taking the tubes out, checking them all, and they all tested good, every tube, including what gives you your B+ voltage. All the tubes were good, but taking them out and reseating them seemed to have made a difference. But of course, taking out a shorting and faulty 428 connector box, right, has alleviated the tone generator from that dead shorting that's happened. So way cleaner and way more powerful. for a little 11-watt tube amp. This is about 6 or 7 times as much power in the internal amp than what it used to have. So we're well on the path to salvation. So I just wanted to share that. Appreciate it. And this is the beauty of a A100, that even when you're 122, your 142 is out of commission, you still have a beautiful sounding organ with beautiful reverb. Appreciate it. Yeah, man. It's organ love.